My fellow Americans, these sudden criminal attacks perpetrated by the system since August 12, 2017 provide the climax of a century of international immorality. Powerful and resourceful gangsters have banded together to make war on the whole European race. Their challenge has now been flung at the United States of America. There can now be no peace between us. Let none prate to me about covenants. There can be no covenants between men and lions. Wolves and lambs can never be of one mind, but hate each other out and through. We can accept no result save victory, final and complete. Many American brethren and kinsmen have been imprisoned or killed by enemy action. American lives have been ruined. American families have been destroyed. The dissident right, the white nationalist movement, and the patriots of the United States have accepted that challenge. Together with other free peoples, we are now fighting to maintain our right to live among our world neighbors in freedom, in common decency, without fear of assault. The full record of our past relations with the system will take historians 100 years to compile. It begins with the usurpation of power in this country by the bankers, who immediately waged the so-called war to end all wars to make the world safe for democracy. It ends with the surrender of President Trump to this international cabal of gangsters last week, an hour after the mass media had loosed its propaganda and panic machines against our flag, our civilization, and our folk. I can say with utmost confidence that no Americans today or 1,000 years hence need feel anything but pride in our patience and in our efforts through all the years toward achieving a peace in this country which would be fair and honorable to every race, ethnicity, and individual. And no honest person, today or 1,000 years hence, will be able to suppress a sense of indignation and horror at the treachery committed by the traitors within our borders, under the very shadow of the flag of so-called humanitarianism borne by their special envoys in our midst. The course that the system has followed for the past 10 years in the United States has paralleled the course of the Marxist coups and Cultural Revolution in Europe and in China. Today it has become far more than a parallel. Anglo-American law has given way to halakha and Soviet kangaroo courts. Neighbors spy on neighbors. Government officials attempt to destroy the lives of their own constituents if they be dissidents. It is actual collaboration amongst internationalists so well calculated that all the continents of the world and all the cities, courts, and schoolhouses are now considered by the system strategists as one gigantic battlefield. In 2009, 10 years ago, the system elected Barack Obama, ostensibly as a way to lessen racial tensions, but really as a way to stoke them beyond repair. From 2009 to 2015, we watched as the United States slid down the slippery slope from alleged tolerance to moral relativism and deliberate anarchy, from recognizing equal opportunity to denying employment to whites, from decrying racism to mandating so-called diversity at the expense of the native population. From 2015 to 2016, we saw the native population of this country band together to elect overwhelmingly a man we believed would reverse the trend of cultural degeneracy rotting the heart out of America, who would right the wrongs of the radical leftists in power, who would drain the swamp and end corruption at the highest levels of government. From 2017 to 2019, we watched the further slide, from allowing gay marriage to demanding that drag queens read to our children. From insisting that transsexuals are not mentally ill, to insisting that dissidents accused of mental illness have no constitutional right to bear arms. From attempting to drive white advocates from public life to seeking the utter destruction of whites in America. Now, in 2019, the system has manufactured such outrage that the president has abandoned all pretense of making America great again, or of stopping the invasion at our southern border, or of ending the corruption in the federal government. After 2 years of callous indifference, he has finally turned against us. It is all of one pattern. We are now in this war. We are all in it, all the way. Every single man, woman, and child is a partner in the most tremendous undertaking of our American history. We must share together the bad news and the good news, the defeats and the victories, the changing fortunes of war. So far, the news has been all bad. We have suffered serious setbacks in the past 2 years. Our men in the right wing, which include the brave people of the white nationalist movement, are taking punishment, but are defending themselves vigorously. The reports from the witch hunts and show trials across the country are still confused, but we must be prepared for the announcement that all of these fights may be lost. The casualty lists of these first few years will undoubtedly be large. I deeply feel the anxiety of all the families of the men in our movement and the relatives of those who have been targeted for persecution. I can only give them my solemn promise that we will fight until the last day. The dissident right will put its trust in the stamina of the American people, and will give the facts to the public just as soon as two conditions have been fulfilled. First, that the information has been definitely and officially confirmed, and second, that the release of the information at the time it is received will not prove valuable to the enemy directly or indirectly. Most earnestly, I urge my countrymen to reject all rumors. These ugly little hints of complete disaster fly thick and fast in wartime. They have to be examined and appraised. Many rumors and reports which we now hear originate, of course, with enemy sources. For instance, today the journalists are claiming that as a result of their efforts against James Fields and the Rise Above movement in Charlottesville, they have gained absolute supremacy in the courts of law. This is an old trick of propaganda which has been used innumerable times by the globalists. The purposes of such fantastic claims are, of course, to spread fear and confusion among us, and to goad us into revealing certain information which our enemies are desperately anxious to obtain. Our movement will not be caught in this obvious trap, and neither will the people of the United States. It must be remembered by each and every one of us that our free and rapid communication these days is overwhelmingly burdened with disinformation, confusion, and outright falsehood. It is not possible to receive full and speedy and accurate reports in today's media, with every outlet having its own particular bias. This is particularly true where reports concerning our movement are concerned. Even from our own media outlets, it is impossible for activists to report their activities by broadcast at all, for the very simple reason that this information would become available to the enemy and would disclose their plan of defense or attack. Of necessity, there will be delays in officially confirming or denying reports of operations, but we will not hide facts from our comrades if we know the facts and if the enemy will not be aided by their disclosure. To all newspapers and media stations, to Hollywood and Silicon Valley, all those who reach the eyes and ears of the American people, I say this: you have a most grave responsibility to the nation, and you have failed in that responsibility. Your complicity with enemy propagandists, such as the Anti-Defamation League and Southern Poverty Law Center, as well as their lapdogs in Silicon Valley and the halls of government, mark you as traitors to this country and its people. In the absence of all the facts, you have no right in the ethics of patriotism to deal out unconfirmed reports in such a way as to make people believe that they are gospel truth. In any event, you have gone far beyond this, poisoning the culture and the minds of entire generations of Americans with your lies. Every citizen in every walk of life shares this same responsibility to act with the best interests of the nation in mind. The lives of our men and women, the whole future of this nation, depend upon the manner in which each and every one of us fulfills his obligation to our country. Now a word about the recent past and the future. 2 years have elapsed since the chaos at Charlottesville, when the whole world first realized the mechanized might which the traitors within all levels of government have been building up for so many years. We have used those 2 years to great advantage. Knowing that another attack might reach us in all too short a time, we immediately began to build our infrastructure and our capacity to meet the demands of the coming fight. We have built attorney networks and legal defense funds, charitable organizations and media cooperatives. Malicious prosecutions are now being fought. Businesses are being built to eliminate the threat of doxing. A steady stream of projects engineered to forge the dissident right into a real political force. That is what these 2 years have given us. But it is all only a beginning of what still has to be done. We must be set to face a long war against crafty and powerful bandits. The government sabotage at Charlottesville can be repeated at any one of many points in the heartland and along both our coastlines and against all the rest of America's cities. It will not only be a long war, it will be a hard war. That is the basis on which we now lay all our plans. In furtherance of those plans, I declare my candidacy for President of the United States. The length and hardness of the war is the yardstick by which we measure what we shall need and demand. Resources, volunteers, doubled and quadrupled work, ever increasing. The work must be not only for our campaign and activists and lawyers, it must reinforce the other campaigns and activists and lawyers fighting the globalists and the warlords of the international financiers throughout the Americas and throughout the world. Over the hard road of the past 2 years, we have at times met obstacles and difficulties, divisions and disputes within our movement, indifference and callousness. That is now all past and, I am sure, forgotten. The fact is that the country now has an organization nationwide built around men and women who have dedicated their very lives to this struggle. I think the country knows that the people in this movement are pulling together with a teamwork that has never before been excelled. It is the unity and resilience of our movement in the face of total persecution that instills fear in our enemies, that causes them to panic and to break every law and bound of common decency to destroy us. That unity and resilience must endure in these dark days. On the road ahead there lies hard work, grueling work, day and night, every hour and every minute. Ahead there lies sacrifice for all of us. But we do not consider it a sacrifice to do all one can, to give one's best to our nation, when the nation is fighting for its existence and its future life. It is not a sacrifice for any man, old or young, to be in the dissident right or the white nationalist movement of the United States. Rather, it is a privilege. It is not a sacrifice for the industrialist or the wage earner, the farmer or the shopkeeper, the trained man or the doctor to donate, to contribute, to forego extra profits, to work longer or harder at the task for which he is best fitted. Rather, it is a privilege. It is not a sacrifice to do without many things to which we are accustomed if the existence of our people and a future for our children calls for doing without it. Many within the movement have no shortage of food. They are able to provide for their families. They have housing and employment. Their ends are met. But many within the movement no longer have these luxuries. Their activism has cost them dearly, and they have lost homes, jobs, and incomes as victims of the present mob hysteria. I ask the well-off among you to donate not only to this campaign, but to the welfare of your fellows in this movement, keeping in mind that soon you too may have to give up many things entirely. And I am sure that the people in every part of the movement are prepared in their individual living to win this war. I am sure that they will cheerfully help to pay a large part of its financial cost while it goes on. I am sure they will cheerfully give up those material things that they are asked to give up. And I am sure that they will retain all those great spiritual things without which we cannot win through. I repeat that we can accept no result save victory, final and complete. Not only must the shame of the system's treachery be wiped out, but the sources of international brutality, wherever they exist, must be absolutely and finally broken. We will make very certain that this form of treachery shall never endanger us again. In order to achieve that certainty, we must begin the great task that is before us by abandoning once and for all the illusion that we can ever again isolate ourselves from the rest of our kinsmen. In the past several decades, and most violently in the past few years, we have learned a terrible lesson. It is our obligation to our dead and imprisoned, it is our sacred obligation to their children and to our children, that we must never forget what we have learned. And what we have learned is this: there is no such thing as security for any nation or any individual in a world ruled by the principles of gangsterism. There is no such thing as impregnable defense against powerful aggressors who sneak up in the dark and strike without warning. We have learned that our ocean-girt hemisphere is not immune from severe attack, that we cannot measure our safety in terms of miles on any map anymore, for the traitors are inside the walls, living among us, degrading our nation and poisoning the youth tirelessly, even as we work and eat and sleep. We may acknowledge that our enemies have performed a brilliant feat of deception, each step in the past 100 years perfectly timed and executed with great skill. The destruction of our country was a thoroughly dishonorable deed, but we must face the fact that modern subversion, as conducted in the Israeli manner, is a dirty business. We don't like it, we didn't want to get in it, But we are now in this war, and we're going to fight it with everything we've got. I do not think any American has any doubt of our ability to administer proper punishment to the perpetrators of these crimes. The entire country knows that for 2 years the globalists have been telling the White House that if President Trump did not bend the knee and desecrate the Bill of Rights and attack the white population itself, the president would be destroyed. The recent media hoax surrounding the mass shootings in El Paso and Dayton has finally caused the president to submit to their power. With the First and Second Amendments finally abandoned, the American Republic itself now stands on the brink of civil war, thanks to the president's submission to these gangsters. We know also that the globalists and the federal government are now acting in accordance with a joint plan. That plan considers all European nations and people of European descent who are not helping the globalist powers as common enemies of each and every one of the globalist powers. That is their simple and obvious grand strategy. And that is why the American people must realize that it can be matched only with similar grand strategy. We must realize, for example, that the Crown's successes against nationalists in Britain are helpful to globalist operations in the European continent. That any government success against the German nationalists is inevitably an assistance to the European Union in its operations against the continent itself. That a European attack on its own people opens the way to a Silicon Valley or federal government attack against the citizens of the United States. On the other side of the picture, we must learn also to know that resistance against the globalists in, let us say, Serbia or Norway helps us. That a successful Russian offensive against the globalists helps us. And that nationalist successes on the streets or in the courts in any part of the world strengthen our hands. Remember always that banks and media outlets, corrupt politicians and bureaucrats, regardless of any formal declaration of war, consider themselves at war with the people of the United States at this moment, just as much as they consider themselves at war with ISIS or Al-Qaeda. And the globalists put all the others who oppose their ends in world affairs into the same category of enemies. The people of all nationalist movements can be honored by that fact. The true goal we seek is far above and beyond the ugly field of battle. When we fight tyranny, as now we must, we are determined that these efforts shall be directed toward ultimate good, as well as against immediate evil. We Americans are not destroyers, we are builders. But history has shown that we are capable of supreme destruction when times require. And in order to raise an edifice, one must first clear the ground of debris and other obstructions, methodically, with metal, and with many hands. We are now in the midst of a war for reconquest and for vengeance, and for a world in which this nation and all that this nation represents will be safe for our children. We expect to eliminate the danger from the system within our borders, but it would serve us ill if we accomplished that and found the rest of the world was dominated by the United Nations and the World Trade Organization. So we are going to win the war, and we are going to win the peace that follows. Hollywood will burn. Silicon Valley will be destroyed. The corrupt politicians will hang for their treasonous acts, the invaders banished to their lands of origin. The power of the banks will be ended, the lying mouths of the press shut. Our patience has come to an end. And in the difficult hours of the dark days that are yet to come, we will know that the vast majority of the members of the European race in all the Western countries are on our side. Many of them are fighting alongside us. All of them are praying for us. But in representing our cause, we represent theirs as well. Our hope and their hope for liberty under God.